turn off my video because I'm trying to just get a feel for who's here. And I see Susie Hurwitz. Yay. Hi, Susie. I haven't seen you in so long. Everybody is muted and I appreciate that, so we don't have the background noise. So please use the chat to put in any questions later if we have time. And a couple times I might ask someone to be brave enough and unmute and respond to something that I'm doing. But otherwise, if you could stay muted. I'm also going to turn my video off because I am doing this from home and I want to make sure that I have the bandwidth that I need. So you can do the same if you want, or if you feel like you can leave it on, that is fine too. You might have a real powerful internet provider. All right, let's go ahead and get started now. We're going to take a look at the agenda for how we're going to spend our time the next hour. The first thing I'm going to talk about briefly is how vocabulary is learned. And the reason why I wanted to touch on this is because when we know how vocabulary is learned, we can determine better how to effectively teach it. And then we're going to look at what words to teach. And then we will go into several activities for engaging students to improve their vocabulary, whether you're in an in-person classroom, whether you're virtual, or whether it's a mix of the two. And the slides should be available on the Whova website. They were downloaded as a PDF, and any link that is on a slide will be live in the PDF. So you can get a copy of the presentation on the Whova webpage. And the last thing that we're going to touch on is the importance of teacher talk for students to learn new vocabulary. So I want to start out with a poll, and the poll is going to come up in a minute here. The question is, what is the best indicator of a student's reading ability and comprehension? And you can go ahead, the poll has been launched. Thank you, Kirsten. And if you want to choose age, vocabulary, highest grade completed, background knowledge, or speaking ability. So I'll just give you a minute while I take a sip of water. The key words in the question is, what is the best indicator? So I'm going to let you have maybe 5 more seconds. And 3, 2, 1, let's go ahead and close the poll. And then if you want to share the results, it's pretty close, but vocabulary is the one that most of you chose at 48%, and background knowledge was pretty close behind with only 39%. Background knowledge is very important for reading comprehension. If you're learning something for the first time and it's new to you, you're probably not going to comprehend as much. But the key indicator is vocabulary. It's the best indicator of a student's reading ability and comprehension. It's tightly related to comprehension across the age span, primary grades, intermediate grades, high school, college, and even in adults. The knowledge of the words in a text is critical to comprehension. In fact, research over the years, there's been a lot of research done on this, and they find that 95 to 98% of the words in a text need to be known in order for adequate comprehension to take place. So that means for a 100-word passage, a reader needs to know 95 to 98 of the words for good comprehension. And for English language learners, it's closer to 98% because they're reading in a second or a third language. They need to know a higher number of those words. And Amelia, I am glad you learned something new today. That's very exciting. Okay, let's go on. So how is vocabulary learned? Well, it's part of language acquisition, right? Children learn words orally through their caregivers and other family members. Now, I am a proud grandma. I have a granddaughter who just turned 3, and I'm amazed at the number of words that she knows, and they're all learned orally. So just for fun, take a look at this picture on the screen. And this is a little girl who is doing something. And what I want you to do in the chat is just put in some words that she has learned from this context. So what is she doing and what words do you think she has learned? Soap, yes. Water, excellent. What else? Hands, yes. And phrases even, right? She's learned phrases like wash your hands, how to sing happy birthday. That's good. We want to make sure she's washing long enough, right? Look at the counter. What things are on the counter? There's the faucet. She has to turn the water on. What is that bird off to the right? That's not even a basic word, right? That's a flamingo. So maybe she's learned that, I think that's a flamingo. Mirror is another one. Very good. So look at how vocabulary rich an environment can be just for oral learning of language. And that's important for us to remember, because as teachers, we need to remember that oral learning of words is important. And then we should share that with our students so that they know too, they need to use these words. They need to start talking with them so that they learn the words that they're learning in class. And when children learn to read, there is a shift to learning vocabulary from what they read. But as I just said, new words continue to be learned from what they hear and then use. And this is one good reason to continue to read aloud to children, even after they begin to read. And even adults like to have listen to stories, audiobooks, because it's interesting to listen to words and to listen to stories too. It doesn't have to be written context. So of course, when children learn to read, these new words do come up in written text, but it occurs in small increments because students must read widely enough to encounter a substantial number of unfamiliar words. And this needs to occur many times. In addition, they must be able to infer meaning from the context where they encounter the words, because authors don't choose words to help people acquire a stronger vocabulary. They choose words to convey their meaning. And sometimes inferring, as we know as teachers, can be tricky and not always possible. And our students don't always do a good job of that. So for our adult ed students, we have to think about, okay, are they reading enough material that contains unfamiliar vocabulary? Probably not. Some of them really struggle to derive meaning from context. That's why we teach reading from context and deriving meaning from context as a reading strategy. And for those of you that work with the lower level ABE students, struggling readers, they may not read at all except for a text message or a social media post. So they're not getting the opportunity to come across new vocabulary words. And English language learners, they have much more vocabulary to learn. And the academic words that we want them to know are more challenging because they tend to be abstract. All right, so let's take a look at, with all the words that there are and the limited amount of time we have with our adult students, what words should I teach? There's a way that words have been classified using tiers that can help us answer this question. And some of you are probably familiar with this, but for those of you that aren't, I do want to review it real quick. Tier 1 are basic vocabulary words, and those are words like we just saw from the little girl washing her hands, like sink, soap, wash, bubbles, relatively easy to learn, picked up orally. And for text written at lower grades, like under the 4th grade level, it's mostly basic vocabulary, but not all. Some children do learn some academic vocabulary and content vocabulary in their early years because it depends on what's being read to them. Let me just give you an illustration of my granddaughter. I was over at their house a couple weeks ago at the dinner table, and all of a sudden, she had not turned 3 yet, but she said, "Hey, Grandma, which dinosaur do you like better, a brontosaurus or a triceratops?" And I was shocked. I mean, I was shocked that she could pronounce them. She did a really good job with that. But I was shocked that she knew those words. You know, those really fit into tier 3, which is content level words. If you study dinosaurs, right, you're going to learn all the different names. But she learned them from her parents, reading a book about dinosaurs, and then having conversations that followed. So she does know some content level words. This is not a hierarchy where you have to learn all the basic words first and then academic and then content. A lot of them kind of intertwine depending on what you're exposed to. So let's go on. Tier 2 are those academic words like flexible, assume, challenge. These words are abstract and they represent concepts, and so they're more challenging to learn. They're used orally, but they are especially found in print at print at starting around the 4th grade level and higher. You will find these kinds of words across all content areas. And then the 3rd tier is content words, and those are those specific, like those types of dinosaurs, stethoscope, radius, circumference. These words are specific to a particular subject or a domain. And when we compare these words to the academic vocabulary words, you'll notice that the big difference between content and academic is content points to a specific subject area. Academic vocabulary is across all content areas. And so the words that we want to teach because of that are the academic vocabulary words. Starting at around the high intermediate level for our students, academic vocabulary should be explicitly and directly taught. These are the type of words that our adult ed students need to learn in order to be able to comprehend texts at higher levels. And because that academic vocabulary applies to all content areas, spending time teaching them will be your biggest bang for the buck. Okay, so we know how vocabulary is learned, a little bit about it anyway. We know what words to teach. Now let's get into what you came here for, effective vocabulary instruction. This diagram represents what is known as Marzanos' 6-step process for effective vocabulary instruction because it was developed by educational researcher Robert Marzano. You can find out more about this process in a couple of books that he has authored. He's written many books, but the book Vocabulary for the Common Core and then Building Background Knowledge for Academic Achievement both go into the 6-step process for vocabulary instruction. The link at the bottom of this slide will take you to a tip sheet for the Vocabulary for the Common Core, and it's a really good place to start to learn about the 6-step process. In the PDF of the slides, the link will be live, so you can click on that and then go out to that and look at it yourself. Now, I divided the chart into 2 parts, and the first part are steps 1 through 3, and just give me a second, I got to rearrange some things on my screen. Steps 1 through 3 introduce new words to the students for initial understanding. Typically in the past, vocabulary instruction stopped after step 2, test on Friday. Make sure you study because the test is on Friday. But research has shown that to really learn the words and to own them, students need to have more. And so we look at then steps 4 through 6, which describe different exposures for students to experience greater understanding of the words. And this is where the learning and the wiring in the brain is going to take place, because they need 10 to 15 exposures of a word in order to really own it as part of their own language. Okay, so let's take a look at step 1, introducing new words for initial understanding. This is what the teacher does, and you introduce the new word and provide a description, an example, or an explanation. And what I'm going to show you is a 4-square map that I would use for each of the words. And regardless of if the students are in a virtual classroom or if you're face-to-face, I would have them keep a vocabulary notebook on paper so they can copy down what you're presenting either on the whiteboard in your classroom or the virtual whiteboard that I'm going to be using today. And in this case, I'm going to be using Google Jamboard. And just for my own knowledge, if you have used Google Jamboard, would you put yes in the chat? And if you haven't, put no. So I just have an idea of what your experience level is. I'm not going to be teaching specifics on how to do Google Jamboard. I'm just demonstrating it as a way to introduce vocabulary words. And I'm seeing a mix of no's and yeses. So for the no's, just sit tight and watch what I'm doing. There are great tutorials on YouTube on how to use Jamboard. It's one of the Google apps and it's very easy to use. You do not have to have, the students don't have to have a Google Jamboard or a Google account to go out to the Jamboard, but a teacher does in order to create one. So I'm going to demonstrate how to introduce a word to your students. And since we're in a virtual environment, of course, I'm going to be doing it virtually with you. And let me just grab my Jamboard. I'm going to share that. Lori, can you see the Jamboard? I believe you should be able to.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, and Google Jamboard is free if you have a Gmail account. That's correct. Okay, so what I did was I created a template for this 4-square map. And the word that I'm going to introduce is motivate. So I put this on the template using a text box. If you look off to the left here, all of these different icons are ways that you can click and then write something or upload something onto the Jamboard. So I used a text box. And then you can resize it, you can move it around, you can do whatever you want with it. So the word that I'm introducing is motivate. And then I need to give a meaning or an explanation of the word. And I already typed this in. I typed in to give someone a reason for doing something is to motivate them. And I just want you to be aware, if you haven't heard this before, but when you're introducing these academic words to students, you want to pick a meaning that they can understand. So make sure you're using simple language. A really good resource for that, and what I used for the word motivate, is the Webster's Learner's Dictionary, which you can get online. It's a great dictionary, or Oxford's English Language Learner's Dictionary. Those are both excellent. They have excellent definitions for words in simple meanings. So I would highly recommend those. So I've given a simple definition. Now I want to give examples and provide examples of this word meaning. So I'm going to choose in Jamboard. This is fun. I like these because they're nice and colorful. This is a sticky note. An example of motivate is coaches. They motivate their players, right? So I type that onto the sticky note. I can choose a color. Let's just go with blue. I save it and watch what happens. I cancel that little box to close it. And there's my little sticky note. I can resize it. I can move it around. I can change colors. So there's an example. Now, if I was in class, I would then maybe put a couple more out there and then ask my students for examples. But for the sake of time and because we're a large group, I'm going to go ahead and give you a sentence because I want to use the word in a sentence. And this time I'm just going to add a text box so you can see that and see how easy this is to use. And I'm going to write a sentence. My parents were great motivators. So I'm using a different form of the word, which I would encourage you to do because the basic meaning is the same, right? But because I'm using OR, this is referring to someone who motivates. And they were great motivators who encouraged me to always do my best. Okay, so that's pretty big, right? So I'm going to stretch it out. This is so easy in Jamboard. I just love it. And then if I want to make it a little smaller, I can do that too. So there's an example sentence. So I'm providing the meaning, some examples, and then a sentence. And then finally, I want to add a picture. Now, I would suggest that you have your students copy these down, right, in a vocabulary notebook, rather whether they are in a classroom face-to-face or virtually. And then if your students like to draw, they could draw a picture here, or they could go out to the internet. If you're doing this virtually, I'm going to do that here. This is the other thing I like about Jamboard. I'm going to add an image, and the word coach is already in there. So I'm just going to use that because I had done that before. And I'm going to look through the images, and I'm going to choose this one because I really like this one. And then I just have to resize it and move it in place. You know, they say pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So research also shows that if you have a picture or an image of the word, because remember, these are conceptual words, they're abstract, that helps understand the meaning. And when I look at this picture, I can just hear this little person, it's not a real person, but you know, saying things like, come on, you can do it, you got this, just make it up the hill and then you'll go downhill for a little ways, you can do this. And so that's motivating, right? So that's what I want to convey to my students, the meaning of the word. Okay, so that is step one. Now let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, that's step one. Now step two asks the students to restate, explain, or provide an example in their own words, and they can add that to their own four-square map in a notebook. You can use Google Jamboard on a cell phone, so if you want them to use a Jamboard for that, they could do that on their cell phone. They may have to download the app for Jamboard, but once they do that, I was just using it on my cell phone this morning, so it's very accessible to them. And then you want to ask them to draw or find a picture that represents the word meaning. So I'm going to ask you to try that. There's so many of us that what I did was I added some frames to the Jamboard, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. In a minute, after I show you what you're going to be doing, Lori will put the links in the chat, but don't do it yet, Lori. Hold on. Okay. Now, the other feature about a Jamboard is that you have all these frames. So look up here at the top and you see 1/8. I think there's 20 frames available in a Jamboard, but we're not going to use that many. So if I click on the arrow, now I have a page that I've labeled example of something that motivates, and I used a little sticky note to add the word teachers. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to put in a sticky note, or you can put in an image if you want. You can use a text box if you'd rather do that, to give an example of something that motivates. I have 2 different frames for you to do this. And then go to frame 4, all right? So you're going to do first an example, and then I'm going to ask you to write a sentence, because this is what I would be doing in my classroom with my students. So I'm giving you the context of what I want you to focus on for motivation, okay? Write a sentence explaining what motivates you to get out of bed in the morning. Maybe you were motivated to get out of bed this morning because you couldn't wait to come to the vocabulary workshop, right? Maybe. Also, I provide an example, a sentence stem, because this is very helpful for your English language learners who just need help getting started. They don't have to use this, and you don't either. You can, or you can just write a sentence on the Jamboard. This example is what motivates me to get out of bed in the morning. And the simplest way to do this is to grab a text box, click on the Jamboard, and then start typing in your sentence. All right. So Lori, if you want to put the links in the chat, because we have a large group and Jamboards do have a limit to how many people can go into one, we have split the group up. If your last name begins with A through M, you will click on the first link. And if your last name is N through Z, you will go to the second link, which is just another Jamboard. It looks exactly the same. I'm going to click on it right now. There's the template. There's where you put your examples, and then where you write the sentence. So they're both exactly the same. It's just the the link that is different based on your last name. So we've got the link for A through M. When you're done doing this, come back. Oh, I can see that people are already in the first Jamboard. Come back to the Zoom room. You can close the Jamboard, or you can just look below at your taskbar. I'm just going to show you that real quick here. Okay, so what you want to do when you're done with the Jamboard is to look for the Zoom icon and come back into the Zoom meeting. So go ahead. I'm going to give you several minutes for this so that you can experience it. You can see how this engages your students. And if you're not comfortable going out of the Zoom window, or you'd rather just stay in, you can do that, and you can see what other people are doing, because I will switch back to the Jamboards and we have a window into what they are doing. Okay, so here, this is the A through L group, A through M group, and they are adding to the Jamboard some examples of things that motivate. Family, my kids, that's good. Your goals that you make, sure. Nobody's gone out to the second frame, that's fine. Here's some sentences. Well, these are, okay, a little bit of combination, that's fine. Enjoying a warm cup of coffee motivates me to get out of bed. Oh, great. I wonder who brings that to you. That's really nice, whoever it is. What motivates me to get out of bed in the morning is having a productive day. Okay. Motivated to get out of bed in the morning by a really loud alarm clock. That would do it for me. Let's go. I am going to look at the other Jamboard and see, oh, we've got people out there too. Failure motivates someone, friends, edible rewards. Chocolate, yes, absolutely. You know, this can make for good discussion too, because you can talk to your students. You know, this is personally what motivates them. Oh, there's an interesting one. Okay, yeah, get out of bed so you can get to the bathroom. We've got a mix here of examples and sentences. That's fine. My puppy needing to go out, that's what motivates me in the morning. Absolutely. So see if there's any others. So you can see how this would be very engaging for your students. But even if you're going to do this, you know, on a Jamboard with the students, which is very easy to do, I would still pause and have them write down something in their vocabulary notebook so they have it for future reference. The other thing you can do, just to point out with the Jamboard, if I click on more actions, you can download it as a PDF, and that downloads all the frames. So if you have like Canvas, if you're using that, or Google Classroom, you could put it out in your learning management system. You could save each frame as an image and then send those to your students so they have it. Lots of choices here, depending on how you would like to use it with your students. All right, so let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. And I have to watch my time too. Adele is saying we could adapt this for corrections by having multiple chalkboards all around the classroom and letting the students do a gallery walk. I like that idea. Yeah, I used to do some work up at the Lake County Jail, so I know you're very, very limited there. Or if you have that big flip chart paper that sticks to the wall, that would be a possibility too. So very good. The idea here is to get the students involved with using the words immediately. And this is, remember, for their initial understanding. All right, now we're going to move on into that left side of that diagram, steps 4 through 6. So 4 says, engage students with activities to deepen their understanding, or to deepen their understanding of the word. The chat box is in the way of my screen, so I lost my place there. All right, we're going to take a look at 3 activities. Say it if, categories, and make sense why, and then we will move on to steps 5 and 6. All right. Say it if is really easy, engaging, it can be fun. You can do it in a virtual classroom. You can do it in person. The way that the activity works is the teacher prepares sentences that apply to or do not apply to the meaning of the vocabulary word. The teacher says the prompt, the students listen, and then if you're virtual, they can high five the screen and say the word aloud, although you're not going to hear them all, right? If it applies to the prompt, they would say the word. In person, they can say the word out loud. They can raise their hand, get their bodies moving, get the blood flowing so that they are actively engaged in remembering this word. So I am going to give an example. And at this point, if you want to show your face and turn your video on, then I can see if anybody's going to high five the screen. And just so you don't feel alone out there, I'm going to start my video too. So if you are comfortable high-fiving your screen and showing your face, that would be great. I just clicked inadvertently. Okay, here we go. So here is the prompt. Say it if. The teacher droned on and on about the benefits of studying. Is that an example of motivate? I don't see anyone raising their hand or giving a high five. I certainly don't hear it. So that's right. If a teacher's droning on and on, that is not going to benefit. And that's not going to motivate me to study. I don't care how many benefits there are. All right, let's do a couple more. Has anyone shared their video? Oh, good. I do have some brave souls who are showing their faces. All right, here we go. Are you ready? The upbeat music got me cleaning my house in no time at all. Yes, that is exactly what motivates me to clean my house. It makes a huge difference. Okay. All right. And the last one. And this is not true, but I did not get a raise, even though I did an outstanding job. Any hands up? People are shaking their heads. Absolutely right. That is not motivating, is it? If you feel like you've done a great job and you were hoping for that raise and it didn't come. So the way that you can do this with students is just like I showed you, but also you can ask students to list ideas and share, have them come up with, different ideas. They can have some great discussion, somewhat argumentative, I guess they could be at times. I know my students got that way sometimes. And discuss in small groups or in breakout rooms if you're virtual. And one thing that you really want to make sure of is that the students are saying the vocabulary word when they are sharing, because that's the whole idea. Categories is the next activity. And the way that this works is that the teacher provides prompts using a word and a category that the words would apply to, like this. Things that are spontaneous. So I'm going to ask you to type an example of something that is spontaneous in the chat. What do you consider? Give me an example of the word spontaneous. Combustion, oh boy. Yes, an unplanned trip, right? A road trip can be planned or it can be spontaneous. Thank you, William Ellington, for entropy. Skydiving, oh, that could be spontaneous, but I think you're planning to get up in that airplane, right? Buying a candy bar at the checkout line, absolutely. Needing to go to the ER, okay, you've got it. So you can see how this can be engaging. You can get a lot of different ideas here on what people think is spontaneous. And again, you can get students together in small groups and come up with a list of ideas. This is actually a good one that you can actually gamify, which would really fit into step 6, but that's okay. It's called Name 3, and that is a way to gamify categories. You put a limit on the number of examples they can come up with. You put students on teams to make it a little competitive, and you give them a time limit. So, you make it more of a game that creates maybe some energy or synergy that isn't necessarily there by just doing the activity. So that's another way to extend categories. Now, I am going to have you do one more activity. This is for a virtual environment, which is what we're in today. And the category is things that are flexible. And so what I want you to do is, if you're able to, go out to the Jamboard and go to frames 6 or 7. So let me show you that. And if you already have the Jamboard open, you can just go to that tab, escape out of your Zoom window and go to the Jamboard. Or Lori, if you want to put the links back in, they can click on the link as well. And you want to use frame 6 or 7. So here I'm going out and we've already got people in there. Excellent. Something that is flexible. I added rubber band, and oh my gosh, this just really pains me to look at this because there's no way I can do that anymore. I did an image search. So try that if you're willing to give that a go right now. Click on this icon here and search for an image of something that is flexible. There are 2 frames here that you can use, 6 and 7, so we don't run out of room. And then I also have the 2 Jamboards. So go ahead and give that a try. We're working on the activity of categories. I'm going to bounce over to, whoops, that's a different one, to another template, and I'm seeing people active. Oh, look at, oh, Gumby and Pokey. Okay, who put that out there? I was going to do that too, but I didn't know if anybody would know who they were. So excellent. I used to use Gumby and Pokey
And
when I was doing
Slinky.
training. And Slinky is very flexible. Yes, I love it. Someone said my pants waist. Oh gosh. Okay. I guess so. It depends on the situation, right? Ballerinas, you guys are coming up with some great ideas. You see how this can help our students then to go deeper into the word meaning by seeing all of these different examples. So way to go. That's great. Okay, you can continue if you want. I'm going to go on to the next activity. The next activity is called Make Sense Why. And in this activity, the teacher provides statements containing target words. Those are the vocabulary words. Students decide if the statements make sense based on the meaning of the word. And then they explain why they think so. So some tips for developing these statements or prompts: personalize them if possible. Use your students' names or something that you know about their life that would be okay to share. Maybe their interests. If you have a sense of humor, you can certainly show that here, because these things provide another hook for memory, for them to remember these word meanings. Now, the prompt should revolve around the meaning of the vocabulary word, not background information, okay? So once you've created it, take a step back, read it and say, okay, would anybody be able to answer this about whether or not it makes sense? Then you show it to your students and they decide if the sentence makes sense or not. If it doesn't, they can correct it. All right, so let me show you an example. Josh was always so reliable, showing up for work every day, 15 to 20 minutes past the start of his shift. This one's a little tricky, isn't it, the way that I wrote it? He's reliably late, right? But I took this word from a workbook on vocabulary for the workplace, and reliable employees would show up on time, right? So I'm going to say no. This is not an example of the word reliable. Now, there could be a little debate here. That's okay. Rich discussion makes for remembering word meanings. Another example, the internet connection was more stable and reliable with the new service provider. Does that make sense? And I would say yes. Now, when I first wrote this prompt, I said the internet connection was more reliable with the new service provider. And I took a step back and I said, to myself, well, how would they know? It might not be more reliable with the new provider. I think I need to add more context, which I did. And I said it was more stable and reliable. So make sure that you double check your prompts after you write them to see if a student can really know whether or not the statement makes sense or not. Okay, I've got some more, and I'm going to ask you to tell me now if the statement makes sense. Yes, no. And what I want you to do is type it into the chat, but don't hit the send button right away. I'm going to count to 3, and then I want everyone to hit their enter key or send at the same time. Okay, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but it's just a neat effect. Okay, so here's the statement. Does this make sense? Elena wrote 4 drafts of an important letter before she was satisfied with it. Type yes, no, and 1, 2, 3, go. People are saying yes, yes, it makes sense. Yes. Whoops, got ahead of myself there. All right, very good. The next one, if Jason loses his job, one implication will be that he will continue going to work every day. Don't type it in yet. Think about it. Type in the letters, but don't hit enter. And I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, submit your answer. Ooh, lots of no's. Yes, they are coming through the chat. If you haven't seen this technique before, it's the waterfall effect, or somebody coined it a chatterfall. It's just a fun way to see all the answers come up. But since the second one is no, it doesn't make sense, would someone be brave enough to unmute and say why it doesn't make sense? Do I have any takers? Anyone? All right, I'm going to call on my colleague, Lori. Would you like to explain why this doesn't make sense?
Okay, sure. Because if Jason loses his job, he's not going to be going to work every day. An implication of losing his job would be that he will not continue going to work every day.
Absolutely. So thank you, Lori. So to correct this sentence or rewrite it so it does make sense, you could say if Jason loses his job, one implication will be that he will not continue to go to work every day. And that's what you can have your students do. All right, I'm going to show you one more virtual activity that you can do with this activity, and this is making use of a Padlet. And again, I would like to know just quickly if you could say yes or no, not because it makes sense, but because you've used a Padlet or not. I'm just curious to see how many people have used Padlet. So far I'm seeing a mix. Okay, Padlet has more features than Jamboard, which is what I'm going to show you. The reason I chose Padlet for this too is because for one thing, it's free. You can set up a teacher account. You get 3 boards, and then you have to reuse them. Students do not have to have an account, and it's accessible on their cell phone. It's really easy for them to use on their cell phone. And I know a lot of students, especially today in our virtual classrooms, are using their cell phones to interact. So you can share the link with your students. This can be used during class or outside of class. So even in a face-to-face class, this could be part of a homework assignment that they could do using their cell phone. All right, so let me take you, I'm going to have you try it in a minute, but let me take you out to the Padlet that I have set up. I'm just switching screens, which is why there's a little bit of a delay there, just so you know. Okay, so here is my Padlet that I created, and I put a name to it. You can choose your background. Again, if you have never used this before and you're interested, I would look for a tutorial on YouTube or just Google Padlet tutorials. I don't know if I mentioned this before with Jamboard, but there is a teacher who has created an incredible number of tech tool tutorials. His name is Sam Carey, K-A-R-Y. Lori, if you want to put that in the chat. His website too is called New Ed Tech Classroom, and he has an incredible number of really good videos to learn how to use these different technology tools. So let me just show you how you could use it for this Make Sense Why activity. So I chose some vocabulary words that I put across the top, and this Padlet is set up in columns. It's kind of like a bulletin board. And then I wrote my Make Sense Why sentences across the top, one for each one. And then I want the students to go out to it, and I've got the directions there. Click on the plus sign under each word to respond either in a text or an audio file if the sentence makes sense, and explain why. So this is the neat feature about Padlet, is that students, they don't have to type, they can dictate and create an audio file, and they can upload images. So let's take a look. I already responded to sentence 1 about Alex contributing to class. And I said, no, it doesn't make sense, but we're starting to run a little short on time. So I'm going to go over to the 4th column over, which is the word exaggerate. And the example there is Brooke exaggerated when she said the fish she caught in the pond weighed 1,000 pounds. Now, I would show the students first how to use this. And so I'm going to click on the plus sign. That allows me to respond on the Padlet. And in the subject area, I would ask my students to put their name. That way I know who made the post. And then you write something fantastic. But I'm not going to write on this one. I'm going to show you another way. In the middle here with these icons, there is a kebab, or 3 dots in a row, right? I'm going to click on that. And then there are all these options for making a response. So if you have never used Padlet before, I hope this motivates you to try it because it's very powerful. I'm going to choose audio recorder. And now it opened an audio booth. So as soon as I click on this microphone, whatever I say is going to be recorded, and then I post it to the Padlet, which I just think is a wonderful way to go, especially for our English language learners. It's getting them to talk. So I'm going to go ahead, you're watching, and I am going to record. This sentence does not make sense because how could a 1,000-pound fish live in a pond? So I stopped the recording. I made a little 9-second recording, and I'm going to save it. I'm not going to listen to it right now. I'm just going to save. And then when it shows the headphones, when I publish, it puts it on the Padlet. And now other students can listen to the recording, which I think is so rich. The teacher can hear it and respond, and the other students can hear it and respond. So again, the sentence for exaggerate was Brooke exaggerated when she said the fish she caught in the pond weighed 1,000 pounds. And here's my response. I'm going to play it.
We're not hearing your sound, Laura.
Oh,
I
you know
don't
what?
think your
Yes.
sound is shared.
Well, that would be true, Lori. It's been so long since I've done this. So let's do that again. Thank you so much for telling me, because that's the power of this demonstration, right? All right, so let's try it again. This sentence does not make sense because how could a 1,000-pound fish live in a pond? Okay, I hope you all heard that.
Yep.
Thank you. That is my oral answer. Another type of answer that you can do is an image, and this is just like on Jamboard. So you can search an image for an image, and then you can post that as a response and have your explanation of why it makes sense or why it doesn't. So this is something that you can do with your students live in a virtual classroom. You can do it in a face-to-face classroom too by just projecting it right on a screen using your computer. And the other thing you can do is you can share this out to them by copying a link to a clipboard and then putting it in a text. If you click on get the QR code, if any of you have phones right now, you can use that QR code to go right to this page and you can start putting in a response. So lots of fun ways that you can have your students access this. Now, we've only got a few minutes left. I was hoping that you could have time to go out and do this, but I think I'm going to move on just so I can cover the rest of my presentation. But this is available to you. I will leave this out there for a while because the link is in the PDF, and you can go out and play with it and give it a try. All right, let's continue on then. That's the Padlet. All right, I'm just rearranging my screen here a little bit, folks. Okay, step 5. Ask students to engage with other students in discussing the new words. Remember that oral language is really important in developing their vocabulary. The discussions can be informal and unstructured, or you can have them formalized and structured, depends on what you want to do. 2 examples to get you started on this is quick writes and pair shares. So in a quick write, the student's going to respond to a prompt in writing. They can do it on paper, even if you're in a virtual classroom. You could do it in a Google Doc, you could do a Jamboard, you could do a form, lots of different ways you can do that. And here's an example with the word commitment. What commitments do you have in your life right now? So you would ask them to just do a quick write a couple sentences about that, and then you can put them with other students. You can pair them up, or maybe in groups 3 or 4. Virtually, you could put them in a breakout room, and they could discuss what they wrote, or you can give them something else to share in that group. And this is really called Connect To. You turn to a partner and explain how 2 of the words are connected. So this is an example. How is motivate connected to commit? So the idea behind these is getting them to write using the words and then to have discussion, because that is so important in getting them to learn the words. And then the last thing is to have students play games to continue to put the new words in the forefront of their minds. And this is a great way to recycle words that you taught maybe a month ago, 2 months ago. Keep bringing those words up, and games are a good way to do that. And the only other thing I want to mention about games, according to Marzano and his colleague Sims, academic games are an extremely efficient way to help students engage with and practice new vocabulary terms, but they're not used enough. They are underutilized. So I'm just going to encourage you, hopefully motivate you to use games as well. So a couple of ideas, and I know everybody knows Kahoot, Bingo. One that I used a lot last year when I was teaching was Jeopardy Labs. If you have not used it, I would recommend taking a look at it. It really is creating a Jeopardy board, but you control how many columns and how many questions you want. So that link is there that you can just go out and take a look at that when you have time. So to wrap this up, the last thing that I want to bring to your attention is the idea of teacher talk. Students need to hear the words being used. We saw that right at the beginning of the presentation. So I just want to encourage you to be intentional about the words that you are teaching them. Use those words in class. And one way to do that is through a word wall. Put it on your slide, put it on your Jamboard, put it on your whiteboard in your class. And Lori, would you please share, if you would start your video and share your word wall for your class, because Lori is actually teaching this semester, and she has a great way to do a word wall in her virtual class. So there it is.
Right. Can you see it on the screen? I'm not seeing my own video right now. So does it show?
I am seeing it. You have to make sure that you're seeing everybody's other videos.
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So there's her word wall.
It's just a
Very
piece of
simple.
paper with the words on it to remind me to use them during my class.
Yeah, she wants her students to use these words, so she's going to use them too, so that they can hear the words being used. So thank you very much. And then I'm just going to leave you with this quote. I just started taking a class on philosophy and theology, and this philosopher from a long time ago said, "The limits of my language mean the limits of my world." So let's not put limits on our students' world. Let's expand the limits of their world by helping them to expand their language. So that is pretty much the basis of my session today. You'll see this in the PDF handout. We have free downloadable vocabulary units on our website. Highly recommended. I know a lot of people have used them, so go out and check them out. We're going to have to skip that, I guess. I'm so sorry. If you have a question, you want to put it in the chat. I can answer that and maybe send it to you. I'm not sure how I could do that, but we've kind of run out of time. I apologize for that. If you want to learn more about teaching vocabulary in any learning environment, we have an EBRI Institute on Teaching Vocabulary coming up in November. And we will be going into many more topics on vocabulary. It's a huge topic. We're going to talk about how to assess your students, how to monitor their progress, how to engage them even more, how to do things like teach prefixes, suffixes, root words, and that kind of thing. So the registration information for this will be coming out next week. And the way that you get that information, folks, is by getting on the list. Take your cell phone right now if you are not on the PDN Network's list, and use the QR code. It'll take you right to the spot where you sign up so that you know what is coming out in terms of PD. And let me see. Oh, and I also included the template for your own use. So that's it. Kirsten, I'm sorry, I kind of went right up to the wall there, but if you have a few more statements, thank you, everyone. I enjoyed this, and please enjoy this beautiful weather today. It sure motivates me to go to the apple orchard and pick apples. So I hope you enjoyed it. And Kirsten, do you need to tell us anything else?
Yes, I just wanted to close us out and thank you so much to both Laura and Lori for your presentation today. Hopefully we all had a great takeaway from it. I wanted to just draw your attention to a couple things as I close this out. If you did want to ask any questions, you can feel free to get back on the Whova app and go to this session on the agenda. And there's a Whova chat. And if you have any follow-up questions for the presenters, you can feel free to post those there, and then we can get them to the presenters and get those answered for you. Our team is checking back on those Whova chats for instances like this where we go right up to time. And then I also wanted to just invite you to join us for our closing session, our last session of the 2021 Forum for Excellence. Our closing session will start at 1:30. So you have a little bit of time, go outside for a little bit, use the restroom, refill your drink, and then we'll see you at 1:30. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.